Good morning, class. Welcome to science. Today is Monday, April 27th. We are going to be taking notes on the ocean, so get ready. Before we get into that, I just want to point out I have these awesome DNA earrings, and I'm wearing them because yesterday was actually National DNA Day. And what that means is DNA is the substance that's found deep in our cells or deep in the little building blocks that make up every living thing. And it tells us whether we're going to have blue eyes or green eyes or brown hair, or sometimes it's going to tell us whether all the time, it's going to tell us whether we're a boy or a girl. It's going to tell us maybe what diseases we're more likely to have. So DNA is fascinating. And we talked about it a little bit when we were reading Wonder and we did Punnett squares and things like that. But I just want to share that in case you have the urge to look up some extra information about DNA today. So today we're taking notes on Look Out Below. This is what your note sheet should look like. I'm going to continue on from here with my notes. So if you have your Ultimate Science notebook with you, this is the very next page after the next interactive notebook. In your Ultimate Science book, you should be able to find it. If you do not have your Ultimate Science notebook at home, I want you to use those note-taking strategies that we've been talking about, especially in those crash course study skills, crash course note-taking things that I've been having you watch to prepare for middle school. Now is a great chance to use them. If you do have your Ultimate Science notebook, remember that any words that are in all capital letters are things that you should be writing down. So let's begin. So there are 5 oceans in the world. They are the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Southern, Arctic. They are Pacific, Indian, Atlantic, Southern, Arctic. So just kind of you have to memorize that and where they are. It's really, really important. Now, if you're wondering why am I spending a whole unit on oceans, the reason for this is oceans are super important. They determine so many things that are happening in our world. They make up 70% of the Earth's surface. If you ever look at a globe, it's mostly blue because most of the world is oceans. It's 70% of our Earth. And so that's why we're focusing on it now. It's not something that we pay a lot of attention to in Colorado because we're not next to an ocean, but it's really important for us to be familiar with oceans and how they function. So we're going to focus first on the continental margin. So the continental margin, which is in all capital letters, so you should be writing it down, a shallow area of water closest to the continents. It has 3 parts, the continental shelf, the continental slope, and the continental rise. So it's really hard for me to kind of show on this thingamajig, but that's a picture of the continental margin. I'm going to try showing you on my lovely whiteboard. So if you're going out to the beach and you've ever been to the ocean, or even if you've been to like the Pueblo Reservoir, you'll notice, right, that there's some sand and then there's a beach area, right? This is where my water starts, okay? Which is confusing because it's all red, but bear with me. This is the water, this is the land, this is the sand, right? So that land doesn't stop and just turn into water, right? When you're standing in the water, your feet can touch another sandy layer on the ground. That is the continental shelf. That continental shelf then drops off and becomes really steep like a slope. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then it turns into a rise at the bottom. So this is the water on top. This is kind of what's happening underneath the water. This whole section right here, all 3 parts, these are all the continental margin. So all together, this is the continental margin. So the first part of the continental margin is the continental shelf. This is the shallowest part of the ocean floor. Keep in mind, continental shelf is capitalized, so where should it go? This is the part of the margin closest to the shoreline. This is a pretty shallow area, flat area ranging from 0 to 443 feet. So you see where this is not the best labeled picture. It says continental shelf there for you, but if you look, where it says sediment wedge, that's actually the part that would be the continental shelf. I'm going to show you on my diagram here. So the continental shelf is right here, this area. So if you've ever been in the ocean, this is definitely 1,000,000% the part you visited. As you're walking and playing in the beach, even if you went really deep and it went over your head, even over your mom or dad's or grandpa's head, it is definitely still the continental shelf. It goes pretty deep from our perspective. Oh, shoot. See, nothing has changed, my class. I am still dropping markers like usual and making a cotton-headed ninny muggins out of myself. You can see my lovely portrait of my dog that I painted. Don't be that impressed. It was a color by numbers. So getting back to this, so this whole part is our continental shelf. If you've ever been to the ocean, that is absolutely where you visited. If you've ever seen the movie Finding Nemo, this part of the ocean would be the part that we start off at. This would be the part where Marlin is with Nemo, and they are in a sea anemone, and there's like a coral reef. Anytime there's a coral reef, that's continental shelf. Okay. The next part is the slope. This is the part that separates the shore from the rest of the ocean. This is where the ocean drops dramatically and the slopes deep down into the ocean, going beyond the sunlight zone and ocean layers. So this would be this part right here. So again, the shelf, slope, and rise all come together to make up the margin. The shelf, it kind of looks like a shelf, doesn't it? This is the part where you've been swimming. If you've been in the ocean, this is where Finding Nemo starts. If you've seen Finding Nemo, you know the part where Dory and Marlin are swimming deep down and it's getting darker? That's the shelf. I mean, that's a slope. That's a slope. That's a slope. So as they're going down, remember, it's getting darker, 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 darker. That is the slope. That really exists in the ocean. One thing that's inaccurate about that is a clownfish would never be able to swim in that part of the ocean, but I digress. That's what this is talking about, though. The part of the continent or the part of that land that goes way deep down into the ocean. So that is accurately shown on this diagram as well. Okay, so then the next part of the continental margin is the Continental Rise. This is the collection of sediment at the bottom of the continental slope, and this is accurately shown here on this diagram, but I do want to show you kind of how that happens. So we know what sediment is. That's a tiny piece of rock, right, or sand. So let's say I'm a tiny piece of rock or sand, right? I'm chilling out in the ocean. The water's pushing me with a current, and I hit the continental slope. What's going to happen to me if I am a little piece of sand and I hit this continental slope? What's going to happen is over time, all these pieces of sand are going to slowly come down that slope and rest at the bottom. So over time, we're building up the sediment down here. There's like a bump at the bottom. This is the continental rise. If you think about it, like, let's pretend the ocean isn't here. If you were here and throwing a baseball at a wall that was kind of slanted like this, would the baseball stick to the wall? No. It would slide down the wall and land at the bottom. And if you threw enough baseballs, it would collect up here at the bottom. That's what's happening with the sand. It keeps hitting this wall, and then it travels down and collects at the bottom. So that's my continental rise. So the whole thing is my continental margin. This is my continental shelf. This is my continental slope. This is my continental rise. I know. Don't you miss my amazing photos? That was sarcasm. I'm a terrible artiste. Or as Alyssa would correct me, I'm not a good artist yet. Okay, so the next part is the abyssal plain. This is the large flat area that makes up a good percent of the ocean floor. So this is like that part in Finding Nemo where there's that fish that has the little light on the front of him. It's actually called an anglerfish. You can go Google that if you want to. But an anglerfish is found in this deep, what we call the midnight zone of the ocean floor, okay? This is super, super, super deep. A clownfish could never, ever go to the abyssal plain, but it is a good example of what the abyssal plain is, why a clownfish couldn't go down there. So as we talked about the other day with the pyramid of people and how deeper equals more dense, so if you're in that bottom part of the ocean, there's so much ocean on top of it that it's actually pushing down really hard on the bottom of the ocean. We're going to talk about that more when we get into ocean zones, but it's awesome to study and know that if we went down there, we would actually instantly die because the amount of pressure pushing on us would squish us. Even if you could hold your breath that long, we would not be able to survive. So there's some really, really interesting animals down there, and you've never seen them in an aquarium or anything like that because that level of pressure and density would be impossible to replace and create in an aquarium, or at least an aquarium that we have yet. Then finally, we have the ocean trenches. This is in the video that I posted above in Wiser Me. These are deep cuts or trenches that go beneath the abyssal plain. These are harsh conditions that exist for the marine life at this level. It's crazy that things live at this level. And if you watch the video, you will see some insane ocean organisms. Highly recommend that you watch that video up there. If you have access to Disney Plus, I believe this is on there too. And it is so worth a watch. It is awesome to see, first of all, how they build this machine that's going to withstand the pressure, as James Cameron, who's the guy who directed Titanic, goes all the way down. He directed Avatar too, I think. He goes all the way down to the deepest part of the ocean. It is so deep that you could fit Mount Everest into this trench. It is just so cool, and I recommend that you learn a little bit about it by watching the video I've included, or if you're bored, great movie on Disney Plus. Okay, so finally we have the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which, believe it or not, is a mountain that's underwater. This is the biggest mountain that's underwater, and actually one of the biggest mountain ranges, if not the biggest, in the whole world. And it's caused by divergent tectonic plate movement. So if you remember with me, we have 3 ways that tectonic plates move. They are convergent, divergent, transverse. We said convergent is what we see a lot in Colorado, those 2 plates pushing each other up into mountains. Or in Hawaii, pushing under each other to build up that pressure that causes a volcano. We talked about transverses, like in California. There's a lot of earthquakes, and that's what transverse is causing. Divergent is usually for those underwater volcanoes and mountains, or those in the middle of the ocean. And so when this divergent plate is happening, that magma or lava is coming up, and it's slowly building a mountain in the middle of the ocean floor. So this is the biggest mountain range. It is caused by that divergent movement. It's in the middle of the ocean. It's called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge because, wait for it, it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I know, so hard to remember, right? I've got to talk faster. My computer is running low on battery. Okay. So that was the Continental Margin. Oh, I'm done. So now I want you to do this interactive ocean continent interactive notebook. And so for each of these things that you see on the right of your screen, you're obviously going to rip out that page with the scissors. You're going to cut out each of those words. If you really want to, you can just write those words in and rip out that page anyway. That's totally fine. I want you to pause this video and come back once you're done. You can go back to your notes. You can use that to help you figure out what each of these parts are going to be. One thing I want to remind you of, we have subduction. So sub means under, duct means lead, shun means act or state. So it's the act of leading something underneath something else, okay? And so what happens is subduction is when we have that convergent plate movement and one plate moves under the other. So this is the answer key. Make sure that you double check. Ask me any questions on Google Classroom if you have them, and have a wonderful Monday.